I didn't plan on causing an interstellar diplomatic incident, let alone falling in love. But when a translation matrix glitches during a tense negotiation with a high-born ambassador, and you accidentally call her gorgeous instead of honored delegate, well, you either start a war or you start a romance. The hum of the environmental scrubbers on orbital station Aegis Prime was the kind of background noise you only noticed when it stopped. For 3 years, I had been a senior communications technician on the station, working under the bureaucratic thumb of Director Hayes. My name is Caleb Montgomery. My job was simple in theory, but a nightmare in practice. Keep the multi-species translation matrices functioning so humanity didn't accidentally declare war on a passing alien armada. We used a modified Cisco routing matrix tied into a proprietary Lockheed Martin linguistic database. It was a patch job system held together by duct tape, prayer, and countless late-night coding sessions. And on the day the Kalan Concordat arrived, the system was already ready, running hot. The Kalans were a terrifyingly advanced species. They were humanoid, but that's where the similarities ended. They were taller, their movements possessing a predatory grace that made humans look like stumbling toddlers. Their society was deeply stoic, built on rigid gut systems, emotional suppression, and calculated logic. They didn't do casual. They didn't do mistakes. A misplaced word in Kalan culture wasn't just a faux pas. It was a challenge to their honor. Director Hayes was sweating through his uniform before the airlock even hissed open. "Montgomery," he snapped, pacing the length of the VIP reception bay. "If the Johnson & Johnson biofilters don't perfectly balance their atmospheric requirements, or if your translators glitch and call their leader a livestock animal, I will personally throw you out of an airlock." "Understood, Director. The matrix is stable," I lied. It was running at 80% capacity, struggling to pass the complex tonal shifts of the Kalan dialect. The heavy blast doors slid apart, and the delegation entered. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Leading them was Ambassador Aurelia. I had seen holographic projections of the Kalans, but nothing prepared me for the reality of her in the flesh. Aurelia stood just over 6 feet tall, her skin a flawless, pale alabaster that seemed to catch the harsh station lighting and soften it. Her hair was a cascading sweep of spun silver, intricately braided to denote her high caste status, and her eyes were a piercing, luminescent sapphire. She wore a ceremonial uniform of deep indigo and gold, armored yet elegant. She was, without a doubt, the most striking being I had ever seen. Director Hayes stepped forward, bowing deeply, perhaps too deeply, showing a subservience that humans weren't supposed to display. "Ambassador Aurelia, welcome to Aegis Prime. We are deeply honored by your presence." Aurelia remained utterly still. She tapped the small translation earpiece fitted behind her right ear. A harsh, high-pitched, static whine erupted from it, loud enough to make Director Hayes wince. The Cisco routing matrix was failing to sync with her bioelectric field. She offered a look of mild, aristocratic disdain. "Your technology," she said, her natural voice a melodic, resonant chord before the translator chopped it into jagged English, "is lacking. The feedback is unacceptable." Hayes panicked. He looked at me, his eyes wide with sheer terror. "Montgomery, fix it! Now!" I swallowed hard, grabbing my diagnostic tablet and stepping out of the shadows of the tech alcove. Approaching a high-caste Kalan without an explicit invitation was a massive risk, but ignoring a direct order from my superior was guaranteed termination. "My apologies, Ambassador," I said, keeping my voice level as I approached her. Up close, she smelled like ozone and crushed pine needles, a sharp, clean scent that completely overwhelmed my senses. The bioelectric dampeners in the earpiece are out of alignment with your natural frequency. May I? I gestured to her ear. She looked down at me. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of total composure, but she gave a single, curt nod. I stepped into her personal space. My hands were shaking slightly. I reached up, my fingers brushing against the cold metal of the device, inadvertently grazing the soft skin just beneath her jawline. Her skin was incredibly warm, contrasting sharply with her icy demeanor. I plugged a micro cable from my tablet into the earpiece. The screen flooded with data. The Lockheed Martin database was trying to force a harsh, literal translation onto her nuanced neural patterns. I had to manually bypass the primary firewall and lower the dampening field. It required intense focus, and in that moment, the rest of the room faded away. It was just me, the diagnostic code, and the overwhelming, breathtaking presence of the alien woman standing inches away. Just a minor frequency mismatch, I muttered, mostly to myself, a bad habit I'd picked up from working alone in the server rooms. Your neural output is a lot stronger than we anticipated. I finished bypassing the firewall and initiated the reboot. The earpiece clicked, the static vanishing instantly. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Looking up from my tablet, my eyes met hers. Up close, those sapphire eyes were infinitely deep, swirling with an intelligence and intensity that completely disarmed me. Without thinking, without a single filter between my brain and my mouth, I exhaled my genuine, unfiltered thought. God, you are absolutely gorgeous, I whispered it. Barely a breath. I didn't even realize I had spoken out loud. But I had just reconnected her earpiece. The translator matrix caught the whisper, processed it perfectly, and delivered it directly into her ear in flawless, high-cast Kalen. Aurelia froze. Her eyes widened, the absolute stoicism of her culture cracking for a fraction of a second. Director Hayes, oblivious to the private transmission, stepped forward. "Is the issue resolved, Technician Montgomery?" I realized what I had done. The blood drained from my face. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. In Kalen culture, addressing a superior with unearned familiarity was an insult. Addressing them with intimate, physical praise was practically a declaration of war. I had just jeopardized a multi-trillion-dollar trade agreement and the safety of the entire station. "Yes, Director," I managed to croak out, taking a rapid step back, my eyes fixed on the floor. I braced myself for the ambassador's fury. I waited for her to demand my immediate execution, or at least my imprisonment. Instead, there was silence. I dared to glance up. Aurelia was staring at me. The icy, unreadable mask was gone. A distinct, deep violet hue, the Kalen equivalent of a blush, was rushing to her high cheekbones, painting her pale skin with a sudden, vibrant warmth. Her breathing had hitched, just slightly. She didn't look angry. She looked stunned. And something else. Something that looked wildly, dangerously, like curiosity. She leaned in, just an inch, dropping her voice so only the newly calibrated microphone could pick it up. "Say it again, human." I thought my heart was going to stop. "Say it again, human." The words echoed in my mind, a direct contradiction to every briefing I had ever read about the Kalen Concordat. They were supposed to be beings of pure logic, untouched by the chaotic emotional spectrum that defined humanity. Yet, standing before me, Ambassador Aurelia was blushing a deep, beautiful violet. waiting for me to repeat a compliment that should have had me court-martialed. I stammered, my professional composure entirely shattered. I meant no disrespect, Ambassador. It was a glitch in my internal filter. I apologize. Her luminescent eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in calculation. The violet hue on her cheeks slowly faded, replaced once again by her aristocratic mask. She straightened her posture, turning her attention back to a sweating Director Hayes. "The audio system is functioning flawlessly now," Aurelia announced, her translated voice echoing clearly across the reception bay. "Your technician is highly skilled. In fact, given the delicate nature of these negotiations, I require that he be assigned to my delegation as my personal communications attaché for the duration of my stay." Hayes blinked, completely blindsided. "Technician Montgomery. But Ambassador, he is merely a low-level maintenance worker. We have highly trained diplomatic envoys." "I did not ask for a diplomatic envoy, Director Hayes," Aurelia interrupted, her tone brokering absolutely no argument. "I asked for him. If humanity cannot accommodate a simple staffing request, I must question your readiness for a broader alliance." No, of course not," Hayes backpedaled frantically, shooting me a look of pure, unadulterated venom. "Montgomery is yours, whatever you need." That was how I went from resetting routers in the bowels of Aegis Prime to standing in the fuelent, highly secured guest quarters of the Kalen delegation. The suite had been modified to suit their environmental needs. The air was crisp, cool, and heavily oxygenated. The lighting was dimmed to a soft twilight. I stood by the door, clutching my datapad like a shield, feeling entirely out of my depth. The heavy doors hissed shut, locking us in. The rest of her delegation had been dismissed to the adjacent rooms. We were alone. Aurelia walked toward the panoramic viewport, gazing out at the endless expanse of space and the curve of Earth in the distance. Without looking back at me, she reached up and tapped her earpiece, disabling the transmission lock. "You may speak freely, Caleb Montgomery. The recording devices have been disabled." I cleared my throat. "Ambassador, I need to apologize again for my behavior in the docking bay. It was unprofessional. Humans. We sometimes speak before we think. It's a flaw." She turned slowly, the starlight catching the silver threads in her braided hair. "A flaw? Your people view honesty as a flaw. When it breaches protocol, yes." Aurelia walked toward me, her footsteps completely silent on the metallic floor. She stopped just a few feet away, invading my personal space once more. Without the looming presence of Hayes or her delegation, the rigid tension in her shoulders seemed to melt away. She looked tired. "In the Concordat," she began, her voice soft, "every word is measured. Every action is calculated for its political or social value. We do not express spontaneous thought. We do not give unearned praise. To do so is considered weak, uncivilized." "Then why didn't you have me arrested?" I asked, genuinely confused. The violet hue returned to her cheeks, a subtle flush that made her look breathtakingly vulnerable. "Because I have lived for 34 of your Earth years, Caleb, and in all that time surrounded by the greatest minds and highest nobility of my world, no one has ever looked at me just to look at me. No one has ever called me gorgeous." She tested the English word on her tongue, bypassing the translator entirely for that single syllable. Her accent was thick, musical, and incredibly charming. "You didn't look at my caste marks," she continued, gesturing to the intricate silver braids in her hair. "You didn't look at my military insignia or calculate the political advantage of my lineage. You looked at my face, and you spoke from your core. It was chaotic. It was unstructured. She paused, her sapphire eyes locking onto mine. It was the most intoxicating thing I have ever experienced. I was floored. This was the legendary HFY, humanity fuck yeah, factor that the military recruiters always boasted about, though they usually applied it to our resilience or our kinetic weaponry. No one ever mentioned that our superpower on the galactic stage might just be our messy, unfiltered capacity for emotion. We felt things loudly, and to a galaxy suffocating under the weight of perfect logic, we were a breath of fresh air. I meant it, I found myself saying, the last shreds of my professional restraint dissolving. You are. Protocol or not? Aurelia smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but it transformed her face completely. You are playing a dangerous game, human. I'm just a tech, Aurelia. I don't know how to play political games. That is exactly why I need you, she said, her tone shifting, growing serious. She moved to a sleek console on her desk and activated a holographic display. It projected a three-dimensional image of a Kalan male. He was broader than Aurelia, his uniform adorned with dark crimson heavy armor plating. His face was a mask of sheer brutality. This is Lord Preston, she said, using the translated Western moniker the system assigned him. He is the supreme commander of the Concordate's Fourth Fleet, and if these negotiations conclude successfully, he is to be my bonded mate. A cold knot formed in my stomach. An arranged marriage? A strategic alliance, she corrected, though the bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. His military power, combined with my diplomatic lineage, will secure my family's dominance in the High Council. It is logical. It is necessary. You hate him, I said. It wasn't a question. I feel nothing for him, and he feels nothing for me. But Preston does not desire peace with humanity, Caleb. He believes your species is too volatile, too emotional to be trusted with advanced slip-space technology. He only agreed to these talks so he could find a weakness in your station's defenses. He is looking for a reason to declare war. I stared at the hologram, then back to her. And my director just handed you the guy who runs the station's entire communication and defense network. Precisely, Aurelia said, stepping closer to me again. Hayes thinks he is appeasing me. Preston will think I am using you to slice into your mainframe. But the truth is, Caleb Montgomery, I need you to help me sabotage my own negotiations. I let out a low whistle, running a hand through my hair. That's treason. For both of us. If Hayes finds out I'm tanking the treaty, I'm dead. If Preston finds out you're betraying the Concordate, you're dead. If Preston gets the slip-space technology, he will wipe Earth from the map within a decade. I have studied your history, Caleb. Your art, your music, your passionate, violent, beautiful history. Humanity is chaotic, but you possess a spark that the galaxy desperately needs. I will not let Preston extinguish it. She reached out, her long, elegant fingers gently brushing against my wrist. The physical contact sent a jolt of electricity straight up my arm. In her culture, casual touch was strictly forbidden. Will you help me? She asked softly. I looked down at her hand on my wrist, then up into her luminescent eyes. I was a low-level tech. I was supposed to fix routers and avoid eye contact. But looking at the alien woman who was willing to throw away her entire life to save a species she barely knew, simply because she fell in love with our capacity to feel, I knew there was only one answer. Yeah, I breathed, wrapping my hand gently around hers. Yeah, I'll help you. The next 72 hours were a blur of adrenaline, clandestine meetings and copious amounts of synthesized caffeine. Under the guise of calibrating the translation protocols for the final summit, I was given unrestricted access to the Kalen delegation's private server node. Working alongside Aurelia was a study in contrasts, where I was frantic, typing furious lines of code and cursing under my breath when a firewall pushed back. She was perfectly still, her sapphire eyes tracking the data streams with mathematical precision. Yet, in the quiet moments between the data compiling, the rigid armor of her Kalen conditioning continued to crack. I taught her about sarcasm, a concept that completely broke her linguistic AI until I explained it as weaponized irony. She told me about the icy crystalline spires of her homeworld, Ethelgard, and the suffocating silence of her family's estate. "Everything on my world is designed for permanence," she murmured late one evening, watching me splice a physical bypass cable into a terminal. "Nothing decays, nothing changes. It is beautiful, but it is a tomb." "Earth is the opposite," I said, wiping a smudge of grease from my cheek. "We build things, they break. We patch them up with duct tape, and we keep going. It's chaotic, but it's alive." She reached out, her cool fingertips grazing the grease smudge on my skin. It was a terrifyingly intimate gesture, one that made my breath catch in my throat. "I am beginning to appreciate the chaos, Caleb." But the chaos was about to catch up with us. Our plan was simple, but highly dangerous. Preston was demanding full access to Earth's slipspace telemetry as a gesture of transparency, before signing the non-aggression pact. My job was to plant a localized logic bomb, a ghost in the Matrix. I used an old cybersecurity trick reminiscent of the infamous SolarWinds hack of 2020. I didn't attack their impenetrable front-end defenses. I slipped a malicious update into the routine background data packet handled by our Northrop Grumman defense grid. When Preston's AI downloaded the slipspace telemetry, it would actually be downloading a corrupted feedback loop. It would make human vessels appear fundamentally unstable and prone to catastrophic warp core breaches. Preston would look at the data, conclude our technology was a death trap not worth stealing, and abandon the treaty on the grounds of human incompetence, effectively packing up his fleet and leaving Earth alone. It was perfect. Until we found the encrypted ledger. It happened on the third night. While routing the false telemetry through Director Hayes' administrative server to make it look official, I tripped over a hidden, heavily encrypted partition. Curiosity and paranoia got the better of me. I cracked it using a Palantir brute force algorithm I'd written in college. What I saw made my blood run cold. "Aurelia," I whispered, the glow of the monitor casting long shadows across the room. "Look at this." She leaned over my shoulder. "These are offshore financial transfers, Earth currency, massive amounts, routed through shadow accounts in the Cayman Islands and Swiss banking nodes. But the source is a Kalen dark web proxy," I finished, a sickening dread washing over me. "It's tied directly to Preston's flagship. Hayes isn't just an incompetent bureaucrat appeasing a hostile alien race. He's on the payroll. Preston bought him." Aurelia's posture instantly shifted from relaxed to a rigid military stance. "Preston doesn't want the slipspace technology to steal it. He wants Hayes to intentionally lower the orbital defense shields during the signing ceremony. He's going to strike Aegis Prime while the summit is happening. With the station destroyed and the human leadership wiped out, the Fourth Fleet will have a clear path to Earth." "A decapitation strike," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And Hayes is selling out his own species for a retirement fund." "We are out of time, Caleb," Aurelia said, her voice tight. The summit is in 4 hours. If I try to arrest Preston, his loyalists in the delegation will execute us both. If you go to human security, Hayes will have you thrown out of an airlock for treason before you can speak." I stared at the blinking cursor on the screen. The sheer, overwhelming logic of the Kalen strategy was suffocating. Preston had engineered a flawless trap. But as I looked at the patch job Cisco routing matrix that ran the station, an incredibly reckless, wonderfully human idea sparked in my mind. "You said your people hate unpredictability, right?" I asked, turning to her, a manic energy building in my chest. "We despise it," she confirmed. "It is the antithesis of order." "Good," I grinned, pulling up the station's core communication overrides. "Because I'm about to do something completely irrational. I'm going to introduce them to the most unpredictable force in the universe, a pissed-off IT guy with root access." The grand atrium of Aegis Prime was dressed to the nines. Banners representing the unified Earth nations hung alongside the stark geometric flags of the Kalen Concordat. The media drones hovered like metallic hummingbirds, broadcasting the historic event to billions of human viewers back home. Director Hayes stood at the podium, looking painfully smug in his tailored dress uniform. Next to him stood Lord Preston, a towering monolith of crimson armor and cold, arrogant contempt. I was positioned in the sunken tech pit, just beneath the main stage, supposedly managing the live translation feeds. Aurelia stood with her delegation, her eyes locked forward, revealing absolutely nothing. "Today we bridge the gap between the stars," Hayes proclaimed, his voice booming over the PA system. "With the signing of this treaty, humanity and the Kalen Concordat enter a new era of trust and mutual prosperity." He gestured to the digital datapad holding the treaty. Preston stepped forward, his massive hand hovering over the biometric scanner. Down in the pit, my fingers flew across my keyboard. I wasn't accessing the translation matrix. I was accessing the station's environmental scrubbers, the PA system, the visual holonet, and Preston's own flagship comms array. Just as Preston's finger touched the glass, I hit enter. The station didn't explode. Instead, the lights in the grand atrium instantly shifted from warm white to a jarring, flashing neon pink. The solemn, classical music playing in the background was abruptly cut off, replaced by the blaring, synthesized beat of 1990s Earth techno. The Kalen delegation physically recoiled, their sensitive hearing assaulted by the chaotic noise. Preston whipped his head around, his stoic facade shattering into sheer confusion. "What is the meaning of this?" Hayes shrieked into his microphone, but his voice was drowned out. "Now," I muttered. I executed the second command. Every holographic banner in the room, and every live media feed being broadcast to Earth and the Kalen High Council, flickered and changed. Instead of flags, the screens displayed the encrypted ledger I had hacked. It showed the massive financial transfers from Preston to Hayes, complete with the time-stamped schematics of Aegis Prime's shield generators that Hayes had sold to him. A collective gasp echoed from the human diplomats. The media drones swarmed the podium. Preston's eyes widened. For a being of pure logic, being exposed in a messy, public, and highly emotional display of betrayal was a catastrophic system failure. He turned on Hayes. "You incompetent primate! You failed to secure the network." "Me?" Hayes backed away, sweating profusely. "You said your encryption was unbreakable." It was. A calm, melodic voice echoed through the room. The techno music cut out, replaced by the flawless, untranslated English of Ambassador Aurelia. She stepped out from her delegation, her silver braids catching the flashing lights. "It was unbreakable to a Kaelan," Aurelia continued, her voice projecting immense authority. She turned to one of the hovering media drones, addressing the Kaelan High Council directly through the feed. But Lord Preston made a fatal miscalculation. He assumed humanity's chaotic nature was a weakness. He failed to account for their ingenuity. Preston drew a sleek, plasma-based sidearm from his hip, aiming it directly at Aurelia. "Treasonous wretch. I will kill you, and then my fleet will turn this station to ash." "No, you won't," I said, stepping up from the tech pit. I held my datapad in my hand, my thumb resting heavily on a dead man's switch I had coded 20 minutes prior. Preston laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "A maintenance worker challenges the Supreme Commander. What are you going to do, human? Unplug my weapon?" "Better," I said, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "You see, Lord Preston, while you were busy buying our director, I was busy looking at the architecture of your flagship's mainframe. You Kaelans love order. Everything is connected. Everything is perfectly networked, which means when I bypassed your firewall to upload a localized logic bomb," Preston's sneer faltered. "You did no such thing." "I did," I replied, my voice steadying. "I tied your flagship's propulsion core to the Johnson & Johnson biofilters in this very room. If you fire that weapon, if you even try to signal your fleet to drop our shields, I lift my thumb. Your ship's computer will interpret the sudden spike in this room's adrenaline as a warp core breach on your end. Your flagship will automatically jettison its reactor into the void of space, leaving you dead in the water, while Earth's orbital defense cannons turn your fleet into target practice." It was a bluff, a massive, terrifying, astronomically huge bluff. I couldn't actually hack a Kaelan warship's reactor from a commercial datapad, but I knew exactly how to make the code look like I did. Preston stared at me, his eyes darting between my datapad and his sidearm. He was running the calculations, trying to find the logical out. But there wasn't one. The chaotic, unpredictable human had boxed him in with sheer audacity. Slowly, his hand shook. The logic broke him. He lowered the weapon, dropping it to the floor with a heavy clatter. Immediately, human security forces swarmed the stage, tackling a blubbering Director Hayes to the ground and surrounding Preston with kinetic rifles drawn. The room erupted into pandemonium, diplomats shouting and media drones flashing. Through the sea of chaos, I looked across the room. Aurelia stood completely still amidst the rushing crowd. The icy mask was completely gone. She was looking at me, and her cheeks were burning a brilliant, vibrant violet. She walked through the heavily armed guards, ignoring protocol, ignoring the cameras, and stopped right in front of me. "You bluffed," she whispered, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You knew," I breathed out, my knees practically shaking as the adrenaline began to fade. "I am learning human nuances," she said softly. "It was entirely illogical. It was completely reckless. It was—" "Don't say it," I laughed, shaking my head. "It was gorgeous," she finished, reaching out and gently taking my hand, intertwining her fingers with mine in front of the entire galaxy. I didn't start the day planning to prevent an interstellar war, take down a corrupt director, or humiliate an alien warlord. But as I stood there, holding the hand of the most incredible woman in the universe, I realized something important. When humanity enters the galactic stage, we won't win with superior logic or impenetrable armor. We'll win because we're messy, we're unpredictable, and when we find something worth fighting for, we rewrite the rules of the universe to keep it. Did you love this story of human ingenuity, forbidden romance, and galactic stakes? If Caleb and Aurelia's journey kept you on the edge of your seat, Hit that like button and share this video with your fellow sci-fi fans. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our epic daily HFY stories and audio dramas. Drop a comment below on what you would do if you met an alien ambassador.